In this video, I'm going to give you an overview of Citrix Machine Creation Services, MCS. What MCS is, it's a single image management solution that's built into your delivery controllers. It leverages the hypervisor APIs to communicate with your hypervisor to create, delete and edit, and also stop and start and suspend virtual machines that you've provisioned. What MCS will do is it will create a number of machines from a prepped image that you create. Each of those machines will reference the base disk, and the machines will be created with a 16 meg identity disk, which contains the host name and the Active Directory information, and it will also contain a difference in disk, which is where the writes go to. You can also create dedicated persistent full clones, which don't have a difference in disk. They are persistent and retain the changes after the reboots. There's always been a debate about MCS versus PVS. So with MCS you don't need a separate infrastructure, whereas with PVS you do. So if you were to implement PVS, you need to have SQL instances that host your PVS database. You need to create a PVS farm with a PVS site, and then within that PVS site you would have multiple PVS servers with access to a VDIS store, and then it would leverage technologies like TFTP and PXE to stream those read-only VDIS across the network to the diskless target devices. With MCS you don't have those requirements. It's automatically built into the delivery controller. You don't need to have SQL, which is good. With MCS, it's used in public cloud workloads. So if you're using Azure and AWS, you have to use MCS. PVS isn't an option, although I have seen a few articles which suggest that PVS might be available in public cloud workloads coming soon. So that's something to keep an eye on, but at this present time MCS is your only option for single image management in public cloud. There is other differences between MCS and PVS. There's always been a raging debate which is better. I personally prefer PVS just for the fact that the image management is a lot easier. With PVS you have VDIS versioning. So you can create a maintenance mode VDisk and promote that to test mode, and then from test mode to production mode. So it allows you to go through the various life cycles. It's very easy to roll back VDisk versions. You just create an override and reboot your target devices. With MCS it's a little bit clunkier, especially if you updated the catalog and the time is past the set period of time. The previous snapshot hangs around for about 8 hours before getting deleted. So if you need to roll back the catalog and it's past that time, you'll have to go through the whole copy process again, which it creates a full copy of the snapshot and then has to copy that to all the data stores in the hosting connection, which can take a period of time. PVS is a lot quicker. Promoting VDisks and reverting VDisks, I just find it a lot quicker. MCS also uses a lot more storage than PVS. With MCS, each of the data stores has to have a copy of the base snapshot. Then each of the link clones will then have the identity disk and the difference in disk. So it can consume quite a bit of space compared to PVS. PVS always used to have a technology called caching RAM with overflow to disk. So all the writes were in RAM. And then once the size exceeded, it then would spill over those writes to a local disk. MCS has now got that. It's called MCS IO. It does improve the write IOPS as all the writes can go into RAM. Previously, when that first came out, it was a bit flaky. There was performance issues with it, but in newer versions of CVAD and MCS, that's a lot better. It uses an MCS diff.vhdx, and you basically have like a temporary write cache disk now, pretty much exactly the same as PVS. You can redirect event logs and things like the WEM cache to that MCS IO a temporary disk, exactly like you could with the PVS write cache disk. So that's that. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you how to create an MCS master image VM. So within my hypervisor, I've created a new virtual machine called 2016 MCS master. I'll go through the steps involved to create that MCS master image. In the previous video, which I suggest you watch, I did set up the hosting connection to vCenter. So that's definitely something that I'd recommend you go back and rewatch if you haven't watched that. That goes through setting up the MCS service account. It involves creating a custom role within vCenter and assigning all the granular permissions to that custom role within vCenter. Just for this lab and demo, I'm using this account here, carmo.com/Citrix MCS. I'm not using that custom role. I've just made that a full administrator, and that's defined in the vCenter level. So that's the MCS service account that I'm using. Within Citrix Studio, I set up a hosting connection to the vCenter and chose the cluster, the data store, and also the network. I had to install the vCenter certificate on my delivery controllers. So what I would recommend is going back and rewatching that video if you haven't watched that. So what we'll go through now is I'll go through the steps involved that I used to create my MCS master image. Once the MCS master image is set up, we'll then install the VDA. Once the VDA is installed, we'll prep the image for cloning. So we'll use a tool called BizF to depersonalize the image. We'll shut it down, create a snapshot, and then we'll create a machine catalog. So I'll go through that whole process with you. Let's begin. So let's connect to our master image virtual machine, which is called 2016 MCS master. So this is just a virtual machine that's got Windows 2016 installed. What I did is I booted into audit mode to customize my default profile. So I made quite a few changes to the look and feel of Windows for the default profile. Let me log in and show you some of the changes that I made. So I'm just going to log in here. So basically, when I was in audit mode, I changed the background just to a blank grey background. Obviously, this could be your corporate wallpaper. But in my case, I just want a plain background. I put a couple of icons on the desktop, the recycle bin and my computer. I set up some taskbar pinning. So I pinned Google Chrome, Windows Explorer, as well as some start menu pinning. So I pinned Google Chrome in an Explorer, some text editors, Foxit PDF reader. I installed quite a few applications within audit mode. Once I had it the way I wanted, I then basically used sysprep, and I used an unattend.xml to copy the default profile. I then joined it to the domain, and here we are. So let me show you some of the software that I've installed. This is basically, obviously this is going to vary. I can't go through each step of creating an MCS master image because it will just take forever and it will always be different depending on the company. You're going to have your own apps. You're going to do customizations and tweaks differently than I am. This is just the way that I do it. I've tried to keep this pretty generic. So what I've installed is Foxit Reader, Google Chrome, Notepad++. One of the prereqs for creating an MCS master image, the MCS master image VM, it has to be joined to the domain. Windows has to be activated. Office has to be activated if you're using the volume licensing edition instead of the click to run 365 edition. Hypervisor tools must be installed. It must be using DHCP as well. So there's some of the prereqs. As you can see, I've installed a couple of other things. Base script image framework, will depersonalize all my applications and my operating system, as well as perform lots of optimizations. I've got a GPO configured for BizF. So in my C drive here, I've created a folder called CTX Tools. Within there, I've got the Citrix OS Optimizer. The Citrix OS Optimizer will really optimize your master image, so it will disable unneeded services, it will remove unneeded scheduled tasks, as well as various other tweaks to improve the performance of your operating system, which your VDA will be installed onto. I've also got a couple of other tools here, delprof2 and NVSP bind. NVSP bind will disable IPv6, and delprof2 will delete any profiles from C users when running the base script image framework. If I show you my GPO for BizF, so let me just log on to my domain controller. I'm just going to show you this now. So if we go to my OU, my Server OS VDA OU, so my MCS master image has been copied to my OU here, Server OS VDA. Within there, my BizF GPO. So you can see disable IPv6. It's going to use that CTX tools folder on the root of C. It's going to look for that tool. Same for delprof2, same folder. Antivirus, we're not performing an antivirus scan or running the Symantec Vi tool. Citrix OS Optimizer, we're going to get BizF to run that for us as part of the sealing process. So again, you can see I'm pointing to that CTX tools folder. We've got some other stuff in here as well. Create a desktop shortcut for BizF, max execution timeout, so it will only run for 30 minutes max. It's going to shut down the base image after sealing. It's going to suppress the pending reboots. It's going to remove any ghost NICs, rearm Windows, rebuild performance counters, run a defrag, etc, etc. BizF does so much stuff, it's unbelievable. It will redirect your event logs, your spooler files, it will clear down your event logs, rebuild your performance counters, run .NET optimizations. It will set up all the auto tuning, all your TCP optimizations, disable IPv6, remove profiles, remove ghost NICs. It will depersonalize all your software, so antivirus, agents like SCCM, SCOM. It will do all of that. Avanti agents. It will do everything. So it's a really great tool. So I would recommend always using this on master images to seal. So yeah, so that's that. Let's go back to our master image VM. So again, you can see here I've not really done much customization. If this was your corporate environment, you'd probably be installing additional language packs, print drivers. You would have Office 365 on here. You would have OneDrive. You would be doing registry hacks for your applications. You might have ODBC connections, configuration files, INI files, etc, etc. But this is just an example of how you create an MCS master image. So as I say, I would be here forever if I wanted to create one from scratch. So this is basically where we are. So we've basically got everything set up. We've installed our apps. We've set up our default profile. We've got BizF on here. We've got the WEM agent on here. What we need to now do is we need to install the VDA. So I'm just going to install the VDA and we'll go through the installation process. So I've mounted the 1912 CU2 ISO, and let's go through the installation of the VDA. So we'll be using virtual apps and desktops. Because this is a server OS, you have different VDA versions. You have desktop OS, you have the server OS VDA, and you also have the core services for remote PC. As this is an RDS based session host that's running Server OS, we'll be using the Server OS version of the VDA. It will install the RDS session host role as part of the installation. So let's click on that. So basically what we want to do here is we want to create MCS master image, which is the first option. So you can see here, select this option if you plan to use Citrix Machine Creation Services. If you're using provisioning services or third party such as SCCM and MDT, you would choose that option. This one here is if there's no provisioning at all, it's just manually provisioned. We're going to be using MCS, so we'll choose the top option. You can install the Workspace app, which is the receiver. You can do double hop, so you can have ICA within ICA, so you can connect to a published desktop that has the receiver or the Workspace app, then you can connect to another farm or site and launch an application within that initial ICA published desktop. So some people like that, some people use it. I'm not going to install the Workspace app. We've got no requirement for that double hop scenario. The additional components, you can install the AppV client. If you're using AppV, you can install the AppV client. We haven't got AppV in this environment. The Citrix supportability tools is pretty good. You get tools like the Health Assistant and the VDA Cleanup, so we'll put that on there. Citrix User Profile Manager, we'll be using FSLogix profile containers, so we've got no requirement to use UPM. UPM, this is the weird thing, you have to install UPM even if you're using FSLogix, because if you don't do that, you don't get some of the profile information within Citrix Director when you're using FSLogix. So even though we're not going to be using Profile Manager, we're going to install it anyways. With FSLogix as well, with multi-sessions, you can leverage UPM for concurrent access, where you can have UPM write data back. So we'll install UPM. Citrix Files is share file. We're not going to be using that, so we'll just click next on here. Now this is where you add the delivery controller. There is various ways you can do this. There is an auto update feature, so every time you add a controller to the site, auto update will add the new controller to a persistent area on the VDAs. You can do it manually, so you'll hard code in the controllers in here and it will go into the list of DDC's registry key. You can do it through policy as well, so within Citrix policies, when you use the Citrix policies via Active Directory, there is a controllers policy where you can define the delivery controllers, and then you can link that policy to an OU that contains your VDAs. We're just going to do it here manually in this instance. So I'm going to enter my delivery controller in here. So it's lon-ctx-ddc01.carmo.com. As I've only got one delivery controller powered on at the moment due to limitations in my lab, I'll just add the single one. So we'll add that. Typically you would have two in here, or you would use the do it later advanced and set the controllers via policy. But if you're going to do it manually, make sure you add multiple delivery controllers. So we'll click next on that. Optimize performance. We can let that run. We do have the Citrix OS optimizer, so that will perform a lot of the OS optimizations, things like disabling Windows search. It will run .NET optimizations, it will perform a defrag, etc, etc. You can click on this article here and it will show you everything it does, but yeah, it doesn't cause any issues leaving that ticked. Remote assistance, if you're going to be using Director to shadow sessions through remote assistance, we'll want that ticked. Real-time audio, if you're using audio over UDP, again, that's a good option to have ticked. MCS I, which we've talked about, which is the writes, you can perform writes in RAM and then overflow that to a temporary disk. So we'll install the MCS IO feature here. Click next. These are the firewall ports. We'll click next on that, and then we'll click on install. And as you can see, it's going to install the RDS session host role, as well as various other components like C++, the Visual C++. It's going to go through various reboots. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video, and then I'll resume the video once it's fully finished the installation and we're ready to proceed to the next stage. Okay, thank you. So it's rebooted a couple of times and the installation is now finished. We've got to do one final reboot, so I'm just going to click finish on that and wait for it to restart, and then the installation of the VDA will be complete. What I'll show you as well, there was one thing I forgot to show you earlier. I am using FSLogic's app masking, so I am app masking quite a lot of folders and shortcuts from the start menu. Things like Windows PowerShell, the Server Manager, .lnk, some of the other stuff as well, the junk that we don't really want users to see. So I'll quickly show you that once this boots up as well. It's a really good tool, FSLogic's app masking. You can hide applications for certain users. So on your master image you could install all your applications, and then with FSLogic's app masking you can then only allow certain users to see those applications. It's a pretty good solution. As I say, I use it mainly just for the start menu, and dynamically building the start menu for different users. So I'll quickly show you that. I'll show you basically how I've got that configured. Okay, I'm just logging in. Okay, so as we're logged in as the local admin, you can see all the start menu items here. So you can see things like Windows PowerShell, ease of access, admin tools, Windows accessories. For a standard user, they won't be available. Let me show you my FSLogic's rules that I've created. So if we go into program files, and then FSLogic's, into apps, and then into rules, I've got a rule set here called block stuff. And this is basically what's blocking everything. So you can see here things like admin tools, the run command, devices, default apps, the FSLogic's folder and shortcut on the start menu, server manager, the VMware folder and shortcut on the start menu, and then just various other things like task manager, Windows Defender, Paint, etc. So what I've basically done is, if we have a look here, you can see this applies to everyone apart from the local admin and also domain admins, because we don't want to lock our administrators down. We need them to be able to access everything. So that's how I configured it. Once we've created the catalog and the delivery group and then launched a published desktop, I'll show you what it will look like for a standard user. The start menu is really locked down and they can only see certain things, which is what we want. So the VDA is now installed. We've installed all our apps. We've installed BizF. We're now ready to seal this image. When we run BizF, it will depersonalize all the agents, our AV. It will optimize our operating system. It will run Citrix OS Optimizer, disable IPv6, get rid of our ghost NICs, redirect event logs, spooler, clear the event logs, defrag, IP config, flush DNS. It will do hundreds of things. So what we now need to do is, before we shut this down, we need to invoke BizF. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to browse to the BizF directory, and in here we have a CMD file called preparebaseimage.cmd. I'm going to right click on that and I'm going to click on run as administrator. And what this will do now is it will kick off BizF and it will start the depersonalization. So you can see there it's applying the GPO, so all our settings are configured through the BizF GPO. So you can see here it's going through all these tools, rearming the operating system, it's performing TCP/IP optimizations. You can see delprof, it's clearing all our event logs. So I'll let this run. I'll see how long it takes. I tried not to. Normally I select the .NET optimizations and the WinSXS optimizations, but they can take quite a long time to complete, especially the first time you run this. So I've not selected those as part of my GPO. So this might be a lot quicker. Okay. Okay. So. BizF shut down, finalize in 30 seconds, so I'm just going to shut down my master image now. You can see it's created a new shortcut there, so in the future we'll be running this shortcut, we won't need to run this CMD file. So I'll just wait for this to shut down, and then once it's shut down, what we'll do is we'll create a snapshot at the hypervisor level. Okay, so our master image VM is now powered off, so what we need to do is we need to create a new snapshot. So what I like to do is I like to create a versioning history, so we do v1.1 initial base. Okay, so that's the first snapshot that we're going to create, so it's v11. If we need to perform any other changes, such as patching or upgrading apps or changing any registry keys or adding any files to the file system, once we've powered on the master image, we'll make the changes, shut it down, and then we'll create the next snapshot, which will be v1.2. But just in this example, v.1 initial base, click on OK. Okay, what that will do is that will create a snapshot. So if we go into manage snapshots, we can see we've got this v1.1 initial base snapshot. So we're now ready to create our MCS based machine catalog within Citrix Studio. So I'm going to go over to my delivery controller and I'm going to log in and open Citrix Studio. As I mentioned earlier in the previous video, the hosting connection, we set up a hosting connection to our vCenter. We added our storage, our networks, and our cluster using our MCS service account that we've defined permissions within vCenter to. So that's all set up. So as I say, I suggest going back and rewatching that video if you haven't done that. But as you can see here, my hosting connection is all set up. You can see here vcsa.carmo.com, and then we're using a domain account, Citrix MCS. If we go back to my vCenter and have a look at my cluster, you can see that that account there, Citrix MCS, has the full administrator role. We did create a custom role in the previous video. It just was going to take ages to add each granular permission to the role, which would have took me too long. So in the end, I just, for lab purposes, just gave this account the administrator role, which will be sufficient in this example. So let's now create this machine catalog. So if we go to machine catalogs in Citrix Studio, if we right click create machine catalog, Okay, so the first option is we get to choose multi-session OS, single session OS, or remote PC access. So server OS, desktop OS, or remote PC access, which is when you install the VDA on a physical machine and provide access via the HDX protocol. In this example, we'll be using multi-session OS, which is server OS. So we'll click next on that. The machines are power managed because we've got the hosting connection in Studio. So Studio and the Citrix host service will be able to communicate to the hypervisor and be able to power manage those virtual machines. So we say deploy machines using Citrix machine creation services. We've got two basically hosting connections here. So we've got two zones. I've set up basically two zones. Actually, let me go back and check these zones, because I was playing around with zones just to make sure. So yeah, vSphere resources is in this primary zone. Yep, okay. So let's go back to here, create machine catalog, next on that, multi-session OS. We'll be choosing the SBC primary zone. Click next on that. Master image virtual machine. You can see here this is our snapshot that we created at the hypervisor level. So you can see here v1.1 initial base. The functional level for this catalog, because we've got the latest VDA, we can upgrade the functional level to the latest and greatest. So you can see here you get new features with the updated functional. So we'll go to the latest functional level. We only want one machine. I'm only going to give it 4 gig of memory because I say I'm a bit limited. The disk cache size. So this is the MCS I/O. So as I mentioned previously, you can have the writes go to memory, and once that fills up, then it will then overflow to a temporary disk. So you can basically do that. So the first option here, memory allocated to cache, is I've set that to 256 meg. For server OS, generally you would set that to 2 gig or 4 gig, depending on how much memory you've got on your ESXi host. You do get that taken away from the virtual machine, so you have to be careful with that. So if you've got a virtual machine with 16 or 24 gig of memory and you set the memory allocated to cache to 2 gig, then that 2 gig is taken out of that memory. So just be wary of that. In this lab, as I'm restricted on resources, 256 sounds good. The disk cache size 40 gig should be fine. I've set up the temporary within the hosting connection. You get OS, PVD, and temporary storage. I've set up the data store for the temporary storage, so that's all set. We'll click next on that. This is the OU. So MCS uses the AD Identity service, and the AD Identity service will manage the computer objects and the accounts within Active Directory. So it will manage the computer password changes. It will control the naming scheme, which OU the machines get provisioned into. So what's basically we're doing here, we're creating new Active Directory accounts, and we're going to choose the OU where these machines should reside. So we'll choose Server OS VDA. Now a naming scheme. So we'll call this MCS 2016, and then we'll do ## there. So it will be, yep, like that. So MCS 2016 -- So if we create 5 machines, it will be 01, 02, 03, 04, 05. That's fine in this example. Let's click next on that, and then we'll give it a name. So MCS 2016 SBC catalog. That's the machine catalog name. I'll choose the same name for the admins. Click on finish, and now MCS will be invoked. So what's happening behind the scenes here is it's taking a full copy of that snapshot. Then it will basically go through creating a preparation VM with an instruction disk. So this is the process that basically it will do. So you can see here we've created a snapshot. Now what's happening behind the scenes is it's going to create a full copy of that snapshot. It creates the preparation VM. It attaches an instruction disk. It will power on a preparation VM, and then it will begin the image preparation process. What that image preparation process looks like is it will set the NIC to DHCP. It will rearm Windows, rearm Office. It's basically depersonalization. It's like a sysprep basically, but it's how MCS does it. So yeah, that's pretty much that. Once the preparation VM, the instruction disk has updated the preparation VM, the preparation VM is then shut down, the instruction disk is deleted, the OS disk and the preparation VM is deleted. It will then take a full copy of that updated snapshot, and then it will replicate it to all the data stores within the hosting connection. Then basically it will create an identity disk for each VM, and then the number of machines defined in the catalog, the identity disk and the different disks are attached to those new virtual machines. And that's basically it. That's how that works. So what I'll do is I'll pause the video, and once that is finished I'll come back and we can have a look at the newly provisioned machine in this MCS based machine catalog. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye. So the new MCS machine catalog creation is finished. It didn't actually take too long actually. I've got pretty fast storage in my lab. It took what, 4 minutes 15 seconds. If we have a look at show details, you can see here the prov task was successful. If we have a look in vCenter, you can see it's created the new machine. If we have a look at the data store, the iSCSI data store, which is what I'm using for my hosting connection, you can see we'll have basically the base disk, which got prepared by the preparation VM and the instruction disk. Once that was prepared, it was then copied to this data store. So if we have a look in there, you can see there's our base disk, which is our VMDK, which is basically a full copy of our snapshot. This is our base. If we have a look at our virtual machine that got created, MCS 2016-02, what you see is this is the identity disk, the 16 meg identity disk. We then have the difference in disk, which is this disk here, and then the temporary storage here is used for MCS IO. So if we go back to host and cluster view, and if we edit the settings of that virtual machine, you can see basically we've got 3 disks. We've got hard disk 1, so you can see that's the delta. This is the difference in disk. That difference in disk will reference that base disk. We then have the 16 meg identity disk. So this contains the host name and the Active Directory information about the computer account. And then we've got the third disk, which is that MCSIO temporary disk that will overflow any writes from memory to this MCS diff.vhdx. So that's that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new delivery group which will consume that machine from that new machine catalog, and then basically once we've done that, we'll create a published desktop, assign a couple of users to that desktop, then we'll log into our storefront / Netscaler and have a look at that published desktop and confirm everything's working as expected. Okay, so let's create our delivery group first. So I'm going to create a new delivery group. You can see we've got one machine free in that new MCS 2016 SBC catalog. I'm only going to add the one machine because that's all we've got. I'm going to allow any authenticated user access to this delivery group, so that will allow everyone to see the applications and desktops within this delivery group. We will limit, we'll create app groups and set the permissions on the app groups, as well as publish a desktop and set permissions on that. We're not going to publish any applications at this stage. We will create a new desktop, so we'll call this MCS 2016 desktop. We won't give it a description, and then we're just going to allow everyone with access to this delivery group. We're not restricting it to individual groups or users at this stage. It's just to get this set up. So I'm going to enable the desktop. We'll call it MCS 2016 SBC and then DG. We'll give it the same name for administrators. Okay, delivery group description, click finish on that, and that is the delivery group now created. So what should happen now is that machine should now be turned on and it should boot up, and it should now start to go through its boot phase, and it should register with a controller, and then we should see the registration state here as registered. So if we go back to our vCenter, you can see that virtual machine is now powered on. If we have a look at the console of that virtual machine, so if we go to Open Remote Console, we should basically see this virtual machine booting up. Okay, yep, you see it's just applying computer settings, applying registry policy settings, so group policies being applied, computer policy. And then if we go back to our delivery controller, keep refreshing, we should see initializing as the registration state, and then this should eventually change to registered. Okay, unregistered at the moment. Okay, let's see what's going on. Okay, so it went through a reboot stage there. What I think that was doing was it basically has to format the right cache disk. It has to bring it online, initialize it, format it, and basically create that. So yeah, that explains why that rebooted. So if we go back to our DDC now, do a refresh, we should see initializing, and then this should turn to registered. Yeah, there we go. You can see now this VDA is now registered. So what we'll do now is we'll log into our Netscaler and we'll launch that new published desktop and connect to that new MCS provisioned VDA. Okay, thank you. So there was one thing we need to do before we launch our new MCS provisioned published desktop. We need to enable our profile management solution. So as you've seen in the previous video, we've got the FSLogix apps agent installed. We're using that as our profile solution. We'll be using the profile container and possibly later on down the line the Office 365 container for our OneDrive cache, our Windows search, our Outlook cache mode OST, but at this stage we're just going to be using the profile container. So what I've did is I've enabled my FSLogix GPO. So this is just pretty much basic profile container. There's nothing else in here. Delete local profiles at log off, dynamic VHDX, enable it. profile type, as we're not using concurrent sessions, it's just a single published desktop, so we'll set that to a normal direct access profile. I've set the size to 5 gig. VHD location is a share on my domain controller called profile container. If we have a look at that share, so if we go to my E drive and then under profile containers, if we have a look at the sharing permissions, I've gave the everyone group full control at the share level, and then on the NTFS level we've got creator owner with full control to subfolders and files only, and then I've got a group called FSLogix users in the Camo domain, which is just a global security group. That's got modify access this folder only, and then the administrators have full control to this folder, subfolders and files. They're the recommended permissions from FSLogix. So yeah, that's set up. What I've then done is I've swapped the directory name components, so we'll have the username instead of the SID once the VHDX gets created. So that's now linked to my server OS VDA. I've gave my VDA a reboot, so it just picks up this computer GPO. So we're now ready to log into our Netscaler and test and launch this published desktop. So this is my Netscaler page. So I'm going to log in with my John C test account. I've been passed through to NextFactor as I'm using NFactor configuration. This is connected to my Radius policy and server, which is using Okta Radius agents. So I'm just going to enter my AD password there. The Okta Radius agents communicating with the Okta Cloud via the APIs. It can see the auth was successful. It can see there's MFA enabled, so now it's sending a Radius challenge. So I'm going to press option 2 for push. I'm going to get a push notification on my mobile phone, which I'm going to approve. And now I'm passed through to my storefront server. Now I can see the MCS 2016 desktop enumerated. So I'm going to click on that to launch that. Wait for that to launch. And I should be able to show you now the configuration stuff that I've done with the FSLogix app masking. So this is just a standard user account. This isn't an admin, domain admin, etc. This is just a normal non-privileged user account. So let's wait for this to log in. Okay. Going through the setup, the creation of the VHD container. So the first logon might be a little bit slow. Okay. So if we go back to my domain controller and let's have a look at the profile container share, we can see there's a new VHD container, profile container being created. So you can see here John C test is at the beginning rather than the SID. If we have a look there, we've got our VHDX. The initial size is 200 meg. So yeah, that looks like it's been created successfully. If we go into disk management, not got permissions to check. But yeah, it looks like it's been mounted. The VHD profile container has been mounted correctly. You can see my default profile here. So you can see we've got, if we have a look at my start menu, we've got our pinned start menu items here. We've got our task bar pinned items, and then this is what I was saying about the FSLogix app masking. You can see I've got rid of things like admin tools, I've got rid of server manager, I've got rid of Windows PowerShell. You can see all that's hidden, and I've only allowed certain things that I want to allow, like remote desktop. If we have a look under Windows System, we've got things like Windows Explorer control panel. But yeah, everything's locked down through group policy. So if we click the settings app, you can see that's blocked. You can see there's no power off options. The user can only log off, So what I'll do a little bit later is I'll apply some more configurations, UEM configurations, drive mappings, some additional shortcuts, printers, registry keys through WEM, Workspace Environmental Management. This machine does have the WEM agent on there, so yep, we'll be able to apply some WEM configuration once we add it to WEM. But as you can see, the test fully worked. I'm going to sign out and then we'll sign back on just to launch it again. The second launch should be a lot quicker because it doesn't have to create that profile container. So if we launch the same desktop again, it should be a lot quicker this time. Yeah, there we go. You see how quick that was. That was a really quick log on. I would expect that to be 15 seconds average, and you can see everything is working how it should. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video.